World Garden Tour begins in Paris, where on the left bank is the Grand Hotel Biron, home to the museum and sculpture garden of François-Auguste Rodin. This impressive chateau, completed in 1730, was once a convent and a Catholic boarding school. After the convent closed, the state rented apartments and studios in the abandoned chateau. It was soon filled with poets, actors, and artists, including sculptor Auguste Rodin. Rodin donated his works to the Hotel Biron in 1919, and it became the museum which bears his name. Today, the fanciful Rococo facade is a welcome entry to the museum and garden. And the first of Rodin's sculptures to greet visitors is the torso of Cybele. The fluid lines and graceful proportions of Rodin's sculptures mirror the Rococo style of the building, as well as a love of nature. As visitors walk down the formal crushed stone paths of the garden, the thinker sits in peaceful harmony with nature, contemplating old-fashioned garden roses and large conical topiaries. This statue of Balzac, like many of Rodin's creations, expresses a combination of outer realism and psychological insight. Proud and defiant, he stands triumphantly within the rose garden and is displayed the way Rodin liked to see all his works, against a natural setting and illuminated by the sun. The paths of the rose garden open to wide, inviting walkways lined with hydrangeas, and the expansive green lawns accentuate this relaxing scene.
À mon avis, il y a toujours, c'est ce que je disais avant, les deux types de public.
I think there is two different types of public. Mothers who come here to take their children for a walk. They're more interested in the green spaces and maybe the nice flowers and colors. Otherwise, the other tourists who come to the garden are interested in the artistic vocation, in the sculptures, and they expect to see the sculptures in scenery, and the flowers bring something more. They add something to the works. But I think it's not really the garden which attracts them, it's mostly the sculptures.
For garden lovers, the Rodin Garden Museum offers a spectacular display of hydrangeas. There are as many as 8 different varieties that bloom through the spring and summer months. Combined with taller, bright pink phlox, they present an eye-catching combination along the garden path.
There is an historical choice of flowers. We have tried not to do mistakes, to choose plants which were there at that time when the garden has been made. But there is an artistic choice in the flowers too.
Another path leads to a wooded area where more of Rodin's sculptures are on display. This sculpture, The Three Shades, was cast in bronze from plaster in 1898 and complements the forested area of the garden. Studies for his burghers of Calais are also displayed here among the trees and shrubbery. These powerful statues are displayed at eye level according to Rodin's wishes. Spectators can contemplate their compelling faces while experiencing the beauty of the natural surroundings. Within this tranquil setting, refreshing fountains meet visitors as they wind their way along the natural paths. This petite pool, in its shady location, combines aquatic greenery with flowering plants like Spanish dagger. Nearby, bright pink roses and potted shrubs adorn a sunny circular pool with a gushing fountain. The largest pool is the central ornamental pond. Commanding and impressive, the pond is surrounded by clumps of white peony bushes and laurel trees. A bronze casting, created from Rodin's original statue of Ugolino and his children, is the pool's dramatic focal point. This magnificent work enhances the dynamic atmosphere of the entire museum garden. This spacious park-like setting offers visitors a Parisian retreat where one can enjoy nature and the uplifting artistry of Rodin's fascinating sculptures. When World Garden Tour returns, we'll travel to London, where the city's magnificent royal parks provide a colorful landscape and a green oasis for both residents and royalty.
This program brought to you by
World Garden Tour now takes us to London and the splendid Central Royal Parks. These gardens were once part of a vast hunting ground, acquired by King Henry VIII in the early 16th century. Although much of the land has been developed, many of the trees and lush foliage still flourish within this city oasis.
A royal park is a public park in effect, but they have this peculiarity that they're owned by the sovereign, the Queen.
Buckingham Palace sits on the western edge of tiny St. James Park, while the House of Parliament is on its north.
St. James's Park is used for all the great state ceremonies, so it's a high focus of British ceremonial life, in fact.
One ritual on record was that King Charles II enjoyed taking early morning walks in the park.
This is a very complete, forgive the word English, but English landscape. In the tradition of the great landscape gardeners of primarily the 18th, but also the early 19th century, dominance of trees, flower beds here and there to give a bright pancake of colour, to give an eye catcher, and of course long views out of the park.
Another delightful feature of the English landscape style is water. Idyllic ponds mirror the sky and graceful waterfowl. More than 17 species of aquatic birds, including swans and ducks, delight visitors within this regal sanctuary.
This park integrates into central London very intimately. It's connected to the great wedge of open space.
Another enchanting royal park is Regent's Park, which lies north of St. James.
Regent's Park was named after the Prince Regent, who initiated the development that brought it into being. Regent's Park is a very big open space. It's a more recent park than the others. It was only fully open to the public in 1836, though it had existed as royal land long before that.
Regent is a great circular park, which pleases visitors with its 22-acre boating lake. City-bound sailors can navigate around its 6 islands while enjoying the scenic vistas. It's a wonderful place for an afternoon outing and a wonderful home for 90 species of birds, many of which are rare and endangered. Not far from the boating lake in Regent's Park is the gold-crested Jubilee Gate of Queen Mary. This gate welcomes guests into Queen Mary's garden, a lovely space filled with secret areas that surprise visitors. On a tiny island within the garden, cascading waters flow over rocks carpeted with alpine plants. Across the island, a bronze eagle stands watchful for the blue heron who frequents this garden enclave. In another quiet corner is a serene garden surrounded by a formal hedge. Here, a small statue of a boy with a frog rests amid an unforgettable array of vibrant tulips and other springtime flowers. Nearby is another whimsical statue, the Mighty Hunter. It's nestled against a slope of brilliantly flowering hedges. On the outskirts of Queen Mary's garden, wide paths, waterways, and colorful flower beds blend beautifully into the formal cityscape.
It's a very early example of a major urban development integrating buildings and parkland as a vehicle for making the buildings more attractive to people who would buy them.
Another favorite garden within London's royal parks is Kensington Gardens. Rebuilt by King William and Queen Mary in the late 17th century, this sweeping pastoral landscape was also home to Victoria before her ascension to the throne.
Kensington Garden is absolutely dominated by the great avenues of trees. These are really great formal piece of landscape, 17th century largely. It used to be known for nannies walking their charges in pushchairs, but I think that probably is rare now. On the other hand, it is very much a children's park. The round pond was really a landscape feature designed as a focal point to one of the avenues. But it's a big area of water nonetheless, used for model yachting and for all sorts of activities like that.
Adjacent to the palace is the Sunken Garden. It's off limits to the public, but in the clipped hedge of surrounding lime trees, small windows are cut out, allowing visitors to peek in and try to get a glimpse of the royal family.
The public can look at it through various gaps in the fencing. It's a set-piece thing to look at, in fact. Partly that's because the number of people who go there would simply overwhelm it if they were allowed to go in. It's quite a small space, though very pretty, as you've seen. I'd like visitors to the royal parks to think of them as places of delight, sometimes of tranquility, but always places where they can enjoy the open air in safety and feel at peace and ease in their surroundings and find pleasure from them.
When World Garden Tour continues, we'll travel to Dessau, Germany, where sparkling lakes and canals take visitors on a winding journey through a magical garden realm.
They may be cooks, they may be chefs, but they all want to be stars. One of these people.
The next stop on World Garden Tour is a splendid garden kingdom in Dessau, Germany, known as the Wörlitz Garden Realm. This magical place was created in 1748 by Prince Leopold III, Friedrich Franz of Anhalt-Dessau. Franz was a peace-loving prince who would rather create a garden than build an army. After visiting the great cities of Europe, he was inspired to create a European garden kingdom of his own, complete with classical statues and architectural features. This novel garden would delight and educate visitors from around the world. Prince Franz devoted his life to creating the scenic vistas and unspoiled landscapes of the Wörlitz Garden Realm. Here, nature blends harmoniously with man's artistic creations. From the vantage point of a gondola floating down its many canals and lakes, visitors can experience the spirit of Venice within this romantic garden kingdom.
The key element of the Wörlitz garden design is water. We can see all over we are water. The Wörlitz garden itself is created around an old river arm of the river Elbe, the so-called Wörlitz Lake. It is very fine to undertake a gondola tour through the lake and through the artificial channels. You can walk also through the garden by feet. But I think the most beautiful tour is to hire a gondola and drive with it.
A gondola ride that begins on the canal takes visitors past Prince Franz's magnificent palace. The palace sits in a natural setting, unadorned by formal plantings. Only a windswept field of wildflowers separates the palace from the waterway. Oddly enough, the prince didn't live in this palace. He lived closer to the water, in an unusual architectural structure he called the Gothic House. Partially hidden behind century-old trees and shrubs, the Gothic house has two distinct faces. From this vantage point, the house displays its British Tudor facade. Visitors touring the canal west of the lake can see the Gothic house from the other side, which reveals its elaborate Venetian facade. Navigating the inlets and channels of the garden, tourists will also discover many enchanting bridges. The Palladian Bridge, which crosses one of the man-made channels, forms a graceful arch of white latticework. There is also a classical Baroque bridge, a rustic wooden bridge formed from the trunk of an enormous tree. And in one of the most scenic parts of the garden, a picturesque stone bridge stands surrounded by graceful lily pads. Visitors will also encounter classical Greek columns and Italian urns which stand fixed in time within the Wörlitz garden realm. One remarkable garden structure is an 18th century synagogue which stands on the shore of Wörlitz Lake. Dating more than 110 years old, the synagogue continues to welcome visitors to Prince Franz's peaceful kingdom. We'll explore some of the garden paths within the Wörlitz garden realm and visit one botanical enclave dedicated to gardeners everywhere when World Garden Tour returns. A tour of Dessau, Germany's Wörlitz garden realm continues now as we pass by fields of wheat and the Temple of Flora monument. This Italian-style structure, with its classical columns, overlooks a sunny front lawn bordered by tidy rows of yellow marigolds. The flowers and shrubs found here are typical of those planted in the 18th century.
And the target for our garden preservation and conservation and restoration is to bring the garden design, to bring the plants and trees on the level of the 18th century.
Decorative clay planters filled with red geraniums rest atop classic Italian columns. Prince Franz's Temple of Flora is a monument in harmony with the landscape and is dedicated to gardeners everywhere. While most visitors to the Wörlitz garden realm tour the gardens by gondola, many choose to explore it by foot. Some paths lead through ancient woodlands, lined with massive oak trees. Other pathways wind through shady groves of lime trees. And others take you along the canals, past graceful swans and statues. Another path, nestled amid the wildflowers, leads visitors to a monument that embodies the theme of the entire garden realm. The Pantheon Monument is dedicated to the friends of nature and art. Practically all of the pathways in the garden lead to historic scenic vistas. And one of the garden's most impressive structures, the Temple of Venus, can be seen from many locations throughout the garden. From a woodland path, from across the wheat fields, and from the lake. Dedicated to the goddess of love, this temple is one of the Wörlitz garden's most popular attractions. At the time the gardens were built, admirers came from all over Europe to witness Prince Franz's Wörlitz garden realm. In fact, his contemporaries marveled at what they called a sensational novelty of this type of garden, with its unprecedented harmony between garden landscaping and architecture. Today, visitors are still drawn to this magical place, and will be for generations. Since it has been declared a World Heritage Site, the garden will remain exactly as the prince designed it. The Wörlitz garden realm, with its sparkling lakes and canals, charming bridges, and lush, unspoiled landscapes is truly Prince France's garden masterpiece.
The Prince invited the people from all over the world to come to Wörlitz to learn something about history, something about nature, politics, and we hope that we can continue this.
From the pristine world of Germany's Wörlitz garden realm to the delightful English landscapes of London's royal parks, to the sculptural botanical vignettes of Rodin's museum in Paris, we thank you for traveling with us and hope you'll join us again next time on World Garden Tour.